something that I don't know if it's general knowledge, but the guitar industry, the people that make guitars, is a pretty tight-knit group of people.
Mhm.
People from other industries that come into this are shocked that John Suhr and I are good friends and that we talk to each other all the time and we text
Mhm.
back and forth and Nick Huber and Bob Taylor and everybody out there. There's a Sheldon Dingwall, and it's just in the guitar business now, unlike when I started
Mhm.
40 plus years ago. If I'm having a problem with material, say my finish, like what is going on? We're having failures in finish. What's going on?
Mhm.
I'll get on the phone and call John, or I'll call Bob, or I'll call, somebody else, and we all help each other
Mhm.
to solve problems. And so consequently, I think that's one of the reasons you're seeing and Avi Shabbat. I mean, it's like from the grand scale of Bob Taylor
Yeah.
to the guy making 20 guitars a year.
Mhm.
Everybody can talk. Every guitar player is now reaping the benefits of all of us talking to each other and helping each other make better guitars.
Mhm.
So I think, I think you could argue that guitars are better than they've ever been. Yes, some of those old guitars are great guitars, but they weren't
Mhm.
all great guitars.
I
I
couldn't
had
agree more.
plenty of horrible pre-CVS Fenders before,
Yes.
but they were a production cheap guitar.
Mhm.
So, um, so I think this is a wonderful time to be making guitars.
Welcome to Life with Strings Attached. I'm your host, Jamie Gale. Today's special biography episode was filmed on location at the Tom Anderson Guitarworks in Southern California, with a man whose life's work is so interwoven into the modern history of guitar that it becomes difficult to see the forest for the trees. That man, of course, is Tom Anderson. Tom's story starts in Southern California. Surf music, the British invasion, a transformative Dick Dale concert at 8 years old, then a Jimi Hendrix experience at 15, all of which fueled a passion for guitar that still burns today. Supported by a loving family home, and later a wife that he refers to as an angel, Tom displays an unusually empathetic approach to business and life. That mix of music, mechanics, curiosity, and family support led him to Schecter in its early days, to a way of seeing what could be better, and eventually to create a business Tom never planned to start. What follows is a story about ethics, loyalty, hard work, great people, and the long pursuit of making the guitars he wished he had had when he was 20. I thoroughly enjoyed getting to know Tom Anderson, and I hope that you will, as much as I did. Tom,
Yes.
Welcome to Life with Strings Attached. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for hosting us here in the Tom Anderson Guitarworks,
Playroom.
the Playroom.
Yeah.
This is what happens. Every guitar you've produced in this building comes here and gets played before it
Correct.
leaves, right?
Always has been.
By you,
Yeah.
and now Markus
Yeah.
gets to do some
Now Markus is doing the first run through.
first
So
run.
he will go through, play them all, full inspection,
Yeah.
intonation. I mean, just blasting, checking for microphonics, just all do any fine tuning that needs to be done. And then I
Yeah.
play him after he does, and I seldom have to turn a screw.
Yeah.
Because he is meticulous,
Ah.
which is great.
Good. Great to hear. Well, so today we want to capture your story.
Okay.
We've been building a catalog, a website where all the unique world-class guitar makers
Mhm.
living. We've been documenting the stories of and building out a page for each one of them.
Mhm.
So the internet becomes a confusing place these days where advertising often dominates over what your actual search is. And so we're
Mhm.
trying to communicate, we're trying to curate a space where if someone looks up a petite guitar and wants to find something of quality, they don't just get sold whoever happened to use those keywords.
Right.
And so those people are in there. Yesterday was James Tressart. We
Mhm.
were with James, and then we're going up to see Mishi Matsuda and Steve Klein and Irvin Samachi and
Mhm.
yeah, Rob Turner at EMG and
Mhm.
such along the way. And
Mhm.
so, you know, we've always delved into the deeper side of things,
Mhm.
meaning I don't just care about the how, I want to know why. Why
Mhm.
you? Why did you do this?
Mm.
As opposed to someone else. What is it that makes you who you are?
Mhm.
And I find that often learning about where someone comes from, who their parents were, their siblings, a little bit of all this kind of stuff
Mhm.
and the journey that gets you to this point. With those moments that if you took that moment away, you might not be who you are
Mhm.
today. I give an example that people ask me how I can travel so much and don't I miss home.
Mm.
I moved 20 times by the time I was 20.
Oof.
I've lived in 43 different residences now. I'm 49. Okay. You get it, right? The point
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
once you understand that, you realize, well, Jamie doesn't have the same sense of home that many people have. And so he's okay with just being out there traveling.
Mhm.
My wife is the same way. She's moved just as many times.
Mhm.
And so we found each other, who were these nomadic,
Yeah, yeah.
but we connect to family, not a geography.
Mhm.
And so that tells you something about me. So I'm looking for those moments in your life,
Mhm.
you know. So if you can take us back to the beginning, when and where you were born, to whom,
Mhm.
name your parents, your brothers and sisters, if there are any,
Yeah,
and then sort of take us through until we eventually end
yeah.
up back here.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I was born in Los Angeles area,
Hmm.
down sort of near LAX, in 1954.
Hmm.
So, and my mom was Laura, my dad, Arnold or Andy,
Hmm.
and, I grew up in a fantastic family. I had a great model of relationship in my parents.
Hmm.
I had an older brother and sister, so my brother was 8 years older than me, my sister was 6 years older than me. So they grew up on '50s music,
Hmm.
Elvis and kind of the beginnings of rock and roll,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so I was subjected to all of that, including the crooners, Jimmy Darren and oh gosh, I can't even think of them all now, but a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
that style of
Sinatra,
stuff.
Dean Martin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
oh
yeah.
yeah, the Rat Pack and all. Well, the
Paul
Rat Pack would have
Anka.
been my parents.
Yeah,
That
okay.
was their
We're
generation.
at Paul Anka by
Yeah,
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 okay,
yeah,
yeah,
Paul
yeah.
Anka, and then,
Hmm.
so I grew up listening to that, and then probably by the time I was 5 years old, I wanted to play guitar.
Hmm.
Um, and I had a badminton racket that I walk around the house playing guitar on.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then surf music happened in the early '60s.
Hmm.
And then, of course, the British invasion
And you're
of
here in California.
yeah, and we're in
You're Surf
California,
Central.
so
Yeah.
I think the first concert I went to, I was 8 years old, and I saw Dick Dale and the Shantays and, Jan and Dean, all these surf acts and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And it had a profound effect on me, especially Dick Dale,
Mm-hmm.
because, the surf bands were all sweet and matching clothes and all this stuff, and Dick Dale was a wild man on stage
Mm-hmm.
and played fast, and, he was just like, "What is that?" I wanna do that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I listened to all the surf music, and then by the time 6th grade came around, I started taking lessons playing guitar when I was 8.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I took lessons for a couple of years, learned sort of to read music, but also just got familiar with how guitars sound and what it takes to make them work. I took lessons at Ernie Ball's store in Tarzana. He used to have a store in Tarzana.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So Ernie was there, his kids, Sterling and the others were all running around the store as kids my age.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They would have recitals for the teaching program. Ernie Ball would sit at a podium and he would accompany you and you would play, for your parents and whoever else was there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then aside from the wanting to play guitar, so I was in a band in 6th grade and we played, early Rolling Stones songs and Beatles songs and some instrumental sort of stuff. But by that time, when the British invasion happened, that was way more interesting than the surf music was to me.
Mm-hmm,
You know, it was badder. You
mm-hmm,
know,
hmm.
they were bad boys, and that was fun. You know, being a little kid. You know, I was 6th grade, 7th, 8th grade, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So always played in bands from then on. And then the flip side of that was my dad worked for Hughes Aircraft, and in his early years, he was a glass blower. So he made vacuum tubes,
Mm.
you know, blue glass for scientific glass and for tubes and stuff. Like he was exempt in World War II because he was a glass blower and they needed tubes for radios and all that stuff. So he was
Yeah.
part of that thing.
What do you say? When you say glass blower, I mean, I think of people with a fire, like literally.
Yep. Oh, then we had a glass bench in our garage, and
But
he
we
would
did
make.
that for vacuum tubes. That was still, it wasn't a mechanized process.
Oh no, that was his job.
Okay.
He had a bench at home. He made
All
wine
right.
glasses. He made little glass animals for my sister.
Great.
All that kind of stuff. So I was kind of always around
Mm-hmm.
things being made, you know, creativity and mechanics and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So at a very early age, I started taking guitars apart because that's what you do if you have a bench in the garage. And I also got into slot cars, which were cars this scale.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into building chassis and bearings and rewinding motors and things to make them go faster.
Mm-hmm.
There was a track near where we lived, and in the evenings they would have races that actually had prize money.
Hmm.
And of course, most of the guys that were doing that were aerospace engineers with unlimited budgets. So I was this kid, you know, competing with these grown men, you know, with endless budgets. But that got me again into tinkering. I love taking things apart and putting them back together and modifying things. I remember when the first Guitar Player magazine came out with the first guitar mod that was put a phase switch on your Telecaster, which is a virtually useless sound, but I did it anyway because it was another sound. And then got into, you know, taking when I saw Jimi Hendrix when I was 15, and that was earth shattering. You know, it was so loud. He was wild. It sounded so great. And so I took my Fender Jaguar and ripped the pickups out of it and put 2 of them together to make a humbucking, because you couldn't buy a humbucking back then. And then I just started taking things apart and putting it back together, and made a living playing guitar in local bands, you know, around the LA area. But I'd say it was the support of my family. I think from a really early age, when I decided this guitar was the most important thing to me, more important than other stuff that was happening at school. I got my school done, but I spent as little time as I had to at school. And where was I?
You're playing guitar in a
Yeah,
band?
playing in bands and stuff, and I got full support. My parents, you know, band would always practice at our house. My mom would bring us lemonade and, you know, whatever, you know. And so I felt like they let me do what I wanted to do. And I had this mantra as I was a kid growing up, is that I wanted to be a rock star and buy my parents a condo on Maui. In the late 50s, early 60s, Hawaii was a big thing on the West Coast. People were visiting Hawaii, and it was very rustic and very, you know, not like what it is now.
Yeah.
So that was a deal for me. And then, so, you know, I never got told, no, you need to spend more time on schoolwork. You know, you can't play guitar so much and all that kind of stuff. So it was whole family and particularly my parents were really supportive of that. So I finished high school, was playing in bands around the LA area. And this was the early 70s, I guess. And back then you could actually make a living playing in clubs and bars and stuff like that. You know, it wasn't the whole pay to play thing that happens now. So I really enjoyed it. I loved it. I was always into gear. I just always was into amps, and I never got into building amplifiers, but I ran into a guy named Dave Schecter at a repair shop in Hollywood. when so I grew up playing old Fender guitars mostly. I didn't get my first Gibson guitar until I was probably 20 years old, I guess. I had Telly. Telly was my main kind of guitar prior to that. But I was playing these old guitars and enjoying some things about them, a lot of things about them. And I ended up with a Nocaster. I bought a 50 Nocaster at a local store. I think it was $400 at that point in time. And the neck pickup didn't work. So that's when I'd heard about this guy, Dave Schecter, that was working at a Red Road shop in Hollywood, and that he rewound pickups. So I went and I met him, took the guitar, and he rewound the pickup for me. And we kind of I went back and forth with him a few times about other things, just because he was a really creative guy and just really enjoyed his company. And we kind of hit it off, I guess. And then about 1976, I was working at a music store. Was playing at night, working at a music store during the day for day job, And this sales guy came in, Herschel Blankenship, who was a sales rep for Alembic and a few other kind of boutique brands back in that day. And he said, "I want to show you something." And he showed me opened this guitar up, and it had the original the Schecter pickup assembly with the 3 mini switches on it and the 3 tapped pickups. And oh, that's Dave Schecter. And he goes, "You know Dave?" I said, "Yeah, I know Dave." He goes, "Well, we've actually started a company, and maybe you should come to work." And I was like, so that was about the time when my girlfriend and I, she went to college, so we dated all through her going to college. And after college, it was kind of, we looked at each other and said, "Yeah, we should probably get married," because I mean, 5 years and we're still going strong here. But we were still dumb kids, But anyway, so I thought, well, maybe I do probably need to get a real job, because that was the middle to late 70s and disco was happening, and that ruined the live music scene in Los Angeles. So where you could go play pretty much any kind of music you wanted to play at clubs before that. But once disco hit, all anybody wanted to hear was danceable disco music. So that was super discouraging. And that's when I realized that I don't want to play guitar bad enough to want to play music that I don't enjoy. So I thought, well, I'm going to give this working thing a shot. So I went to work at Schecter in 77.
As a guitar builder and a player, you have a sense for when something's working right. That's why so many of the world's best trust D'Addario. Unmatched tone, perfect intonation, and strings made to the tightest tolerances in the industry. That reputation is no accident. It's the result of 400 years of being obsessed with quality and innovation. D'Addario, when you know, you know.
And I say meeting Dave Schecter was a pivotal time, as well as my parents being as encouraging as they were. So started at Schecter in 77, which the company had just probably 6 months before that really came into existence. And at that point in time, the whole guitar parts thing was kind of just starting. There was Boogie Bodies up in Washington. Ken Warmoth was one of the partners in that business. Wayne Charvel was down in Orange County finishing stuff, not really making anything yet. And then so we started at Schecter. They put the sales company together called ISA, and they were trying to get us all put together in one place, or at least they were going to sell. So they said, well, let's have Boogie Bodies make bodies and necks. We'll have Wayne Charvel was making his first product was an aluminum 4-hole jack plate for Les Pauls, because they were plastic and they always broke. So that was his first replacement part that he sold. And then Schecter had this pickup assembly. So they said, well, we'll put these 3 companies together. We'll sell the stuff that they make.
Mhm.
Well, it didn't last very long before Boogie Body said, I don't want to be part of that thing, And then
Mhm.
so Dave Schecter went down to Charvel, helped set up their wood shop,
Mhm.
made some templates for making bodies. And then it wasn't long before that fell apart. And then so it ended up being Schecter making all the stuff. So we set up a wood shop, we had a metal shop, we made all the metal parts, knobs, bridges, jack plates, pick guards, all the different stuff.
Mhm.
And then and so we already made pickups.
Mhm.
So we made all the different components, and the main business for Schecter was parts.
Mhm.
We made a very small number of guitars, never more than like 5 a week. It was a really
Mhm.
small amount of guitars. Um, and then that company grew to about 30 employees, I think, at its peak. And I thought I was going to retire from that company.
Hmm.
I thought I love this. It's just like this. I'm doing what I love to do. Working with Dave was great. We kind of figured a lot of stuff out together.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think he was a pivotal person in my life in that more than any other person I've ever met, he had the ability to look at something, whether it was a guitar, a car, a toaster, I mean, you name it. And he had this focus that he could look at just about anything you could possibly imagine and pinpoint, "Boy, I wish they'd done this better, or I wish they'd have done this better. Or they should have done this a different way because then it would have worked better."
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so I think I learned a lot of critical thinking skills from Dave. And um, so Schecter grew, and eventually uh, financial troubles happened, and they brought in some investors that were not from the music industry, and
Mhm.
they ended up, you know, letting Dave go because he didn't have a daily production job.
Mhm.
They said, "What do we need him for?"
Mhm.
And then they sent me to Japan to source bodies and necks because, why should we make bodies and necks here when we could buy them from somewhere else cheaper? And it was
Mhm.
just super discouraging for me seeing something that I really loved being changed in a way that I didn't agree was the best way.
Mhm.
So Dave, right before he left, he just said, Tom, if you really want to do this, you need to do it yourself without investors so that no one can tell you how to do what you want to do.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I thought, that is the last thing I want to do. That was not on my radar. That was not, didn't even sound like interesting.
Mhm. Mhm.
But it was clear that what was happening there wasn't going to go on forever, and
Yeah.
certainly not the way I wanted it to be. Um, so I went home to my wife. We had a 2-year-old, and we were 2 months away from our second child.
Mhm.
My wife, Catherine, is a saint.
Mhm.
I went home one day and I said, "Hey, I quit my job today.
Mhm.
I'm going to start a business."
Mhm.
And she said, "Have you lost your mind?" And I said, "No, I think I can do this," because I had certainly had people that we were making parts for at Schecter, bodies and necks and stuff for
Mhm.
John Suhr and Roger Sadowski and that kind of stuff, and Jim Tyler. And so I said, "Well, I think I have a little bit of a built-in business if I can get all the machinery I need to do stuff."
Mhm.
Um, so so we did it. Now she said to me, she goes, "You're not a businessman." I go, "I know, but I know how to make guitars, and I know
Mhm.
I know how to do this, and I there's plenty still to learn and stuff, but I think I can do this." And she goes, "You're too ethical. You can't be a businessman if you're ethical." and and it really made me not worry, but it made me wonder, like, is she right? Can you not run a business ethically and treat people fairly and all that stuff? And I said, why can't we do that? So
Mhm.
so we did, and it just grew and grew. I spent 1 year working out of my garage at home,
Mhm.
had a pin router in the garage, and it was just packed with stuff. You could barely walk in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, I was doing a lot of work for Steve Ripley, who made the stereo guitar back in the late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And Kramer had picked him up
Mm-hmm.
because Ed used the stereo guitar on a song on one of the Van Halen records.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Steve kind of talked me up to the people at Kramer, and I started building artist guitars for them. So I started.
What year is this that you're working out of your
This
garage and
was
then doing some work for Kramer?
86, 87,
86, 87.
88,
Okay.
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Almost 10 years after starting with Schecter.
Yeah, I started I left Schecter in 84.
84.
Yeah.
So you spent 7 years there.
Yeah. So spring of 84, left. And like I said, worked out of my garage. And without a clear picture of how I was going to generate enough money to support our family.
Mm-hmm.
My wife was working part-time so we had medical insurance. She worked at Robinson's department store, which is like a Macy's now. They're not around anymore. So those first few years, she worked nights, I worked days. We passed at 6 o'clock and 5 o'clock, so see you later, see you at bedtime, and that worked for a while for us. And then Schecter had set up a division in Japan to make products for Japanese consumption. They would make bodies and necks over there, and we would ship bridges and pickups from the U.S. and they would assemble them over there for Japanese consumption. And Schecter closed in probably August of 84. So several months after I left, they closed up because there was nobody that knew how to do anything anymore, and the people that were running it were from the meat business in Texas, and they didn't know anything about guitars, and they were just looking at bottom line kind of stuff. So I got a call from Joichi Yui, who Schecter had set up in Japan to run Schecter Japan. And he said, "Tom, I really need American-made pickups for these guitars we're selling in Japan." So he was coming over to the U.S., so we met at a Carl's Jr., and we struck a deal to make 300 Strat pickups a month for Schecter Japan. And that's what fed my family that first year in the garage and allowed me to generate enough money to buy some of the equipment that I needed to start thinking about making bodies and necks. And I think in my garage, was the first, made my first outside of Schecter body for John Suhr. He was at Pensa, Rudy's Music Stop in New York, making Pensa Suhr stuff. So that's when I started making bodies and necks for him. Well, bodies first, because I didn't have everything I needed to make necks yet. And then contacted Roger and started making stuff for him. Contacted Jim and started making stuff for him.
Roger Studowski and Jim
Tyler. Yeah. All three of those people I knew from being at Schecter. So doing this work for Kramer, Steve proposed we make pickups for Kramer. So we had this big business plan of how we were going to make these thousands of pickups a month for Kramer, and we thought, okay, we're going to need a place to do it. So I got my first shop, which was about 1,600 square feet, and got the shop, had nothing in it, hardly had any equipment at all. And then Kramer decided not to do the pickups. So there I was with overhead and rent and all this, stuff with, but these pickups, like I said, kept my family fed, those first years. And then I started adding, I got up to, I think after a few years, I had 3 people working with me, 4 people working with me. And we were making bodies and necks and pickups and selling those things as parts. And then Herschel Blankenship, who had been one of the partners in Schecter, had started a retail store in LA area called Lab Sound. and they were the rack place. You know, rack, late 80s. That was racks. So they were the Mesa Boogie amps and racks and stuff. So and he just said, you know, if you put some guitars together out of these parts, I bet I could sell them in the store. And I wasn't anxious to do that. I kind of enjoyed making parts. But we made some guitars and they started selling them. And then he was part of connecting to a few other big dealers around the country. And he would spread the word to them and they would order one or two or whatever. It was very small numbers of guitars. And then that just grew and grew. And then then we moved into our shop previous to this one, which was 4,400 square feet. So from 1,600 to 4,400, it was massive and we'll never fill it up, but we filled it up. And then we were at that place for 25 years or so, I think. And we got up to the point of, we were in this 700 to 850 guitars a year kind of size. There was, 15 people or something I think we got up to.
Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Providence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com.
Another pivotal moment was Guitar Player magazine did a Tele Shootout in the early 90s. And we sent one of our Hollow T classics, which is pretty traditional Tele. We sent a dual humbucking short scale Tele-shaped guitar, and we sent another long scale humbucking single humbucking Tele guitar. And we won first, second, and fourth place out of all these guitars, and that put us on the map. Because otherwise, there was no internet, there was no, it was only magazine ads, and magazine ads are expensive, and we ran tiny little ads, But that Guitar Player Shootout kind of put us on the map for that stuff.
When was that? Do you know the year?
I think it was 89 or 90. Might have been slightly earlier than that, but I'm not too much earlier than that.
Okay.
And like I said, we stayed at that same size for a long time. So in 89, I took on a business partner. My wife was telling me, I was running my business on a yellow pad. I didn't have a computer, and I just was, when the page got full of orders, we made those orders. It was just completely low tech. And my bookkeeping was equally low tech. So my wife said, you really need to get somebody to help do the administrative part of the business. So there was a friend of ours that had been in hospital administration, and she was currently not working because she got sick of that part of the job. And so we were actually camping at the beach, and they were there. Her and her husband were there too. And we took a walk on the beach, and we talked about, she was bored, and she said, well, I could come in and maybe work for 6 months and get you set up with systems and to make things work, and then I'll find something else to do. And she was my partner for 28 years. She passed away in 2017, pretty suddenly. And it pretty much, this was a functioning business.
Yeah.
But she was a big part of the heart of the company.
What was her name?
It was a very interesting, my warning about having a partner never turned into anything with Lori. It was, we were completely different. She was completely data driven, and I was, no, I feel like this is what we're doing. And it was uncanny how we would talk about a particular subject, and she would come up with what she thought, I come up with my thought, and they always were the same. It was just this weird thing. I mean, just, it always frustrated her that I didn't do any work to come up with my numbers, and she had spreadsheets and, and all that stuff, she could back everything up. That all her decisions were backed up with data, and mine were just like, no, I think this feels better. And we just never argued about anything. She was, from a very early time, an advocate for our employees. We were very early on doing medical insurance, and we started doing profit sharing fairly early on in the business, because it was clear that people who stay and do a great job and feel valued do a better job than people who hate going to work every day. And so I think we never lost people. I mean, we had a couple people move out of state and then come back, because they missed, working here. And so I think that was and is why we're as efficient as we are with what we do, because we treat our people well. They're important. I mean, they're, and our vendors equally. I know other people who buy things and they grind their vendors for the cheapest possible price and stuff. And I always tell my vendors, I said, I'm very, if I'm buying from this person and this guy over here says, I really want to be a vendor too. And I said, well, you're going to have to earn it, because I'm really loyal to my vendors, because they are part of why we are where we are. If I didn't have predictable, dependable vendors to get me what I really need, not just what they happen to have the cheapest that day. That's really important. So that's another, I'd say, pivotal thing about this business, is that employees are really important. We have people that have been here 35 years. We just had a guy retire at the end of last year. Has been here since 92 or 3, I think. So it allows us to do the things we want to do, because we're not constantly training new people. We don't micromanage anybody out in the shop. These people have been doing this stuff for so long that they know what needs to get done every day and stuff. So, and then we since Markus has been here, we've been doing a lot more planned meetings, as far as talking about where we are, what's going well, what's not going well, getting more input from the people that are doing the work. I mean, in the old days, there were many years when I was the only painter. There was many years when I made all the necks. There were, all that kind of stuff. But, the more people you have, we're up to 24 people now total. So I can't paint every guitar, and I can't, physically or, there's just so much stuff to be done that you got to portion it out to people that know how to do it. So I'd say that sort of gets us to this place. So we moved in here in 2012, and because the shop is laid out more efficiently than our old shop. Well, our old shop evolved. So the finish department was in the 2 farthest corners from each other, we did so, and they had to go all the way through everything, back and forth, moving stuff around every day. So when we moved in here, we laid it out really nicely, and so that things flow through the shop uniformly and efficiently. And so we did actually get more guitars made here with the same people and the same machines, and then
do you know how much that changed? How much more efficient do you think it got? Do you know what the numbers?
When we first moved over, I think we were doing, say, 800 guitars, and the very first year we were here, we made 50 more guitars.
Okay. Yeah, substantial.
And then we floated into this 900 number for a while because
Mhm.
we had more space, so we actually added a few more people. And then when Lori passed away in 2017, um, Rachel, who was doing some of the office work when Lori was here,
Yeah.
she was still here, so she took over many of Lori's like bookkeeping kind of duties and
Mhm,
stuff.
mhm,
And uh, but there was a lot more administrative stuff that fell on me than previously had,
mhm, mhm,
and it really kind of took its toll on me. It wasn't as fun for me to come to work
mhm, mhm.
as it had been. Uh, and so I started both thinking about the day to day here, but also I started thinking about the future because, and this happened, it was about 5 years ago. This started
Yeah.
because Lori passed in 2017, and it was within a couple of years after that is when I really figured something needs to change here for this to work as
Mhm,
well as it should.
mhm.
Um, it sounded like we were still profitable and we were getting stuff made and all that stuff, but
Yeah.
it was wearing on me, and I didn't feel I was as responsive as I could have been in the past. I
Mhm,
wasn't as interactive as I was because I was buried with administrative kind of stuff along
mhm.
with all the other stuff that I have to do.
Yeah, yeah.
So I started talking with my wife and Catherine,
Mhm.
um, who I will say again is a saint for putting up with me. I was late to dinner every day for years. You know, there she's sitting there with 3 kids at home, and I'm late for dinner every day because I can't get out of here. Um,
Mhm.
we talked about, I said, well, someday I won't be here, whether that's I get hit by a bus tomorrow,
Mhm.
or I get real sick and I'm gone, or I'm just too old to do this anymore, or but there will be a day when I won't be here was kind of the reality of where my head was at and
Yeah, yeah.
stuff. Because I was, let's see, 5 years ago, so I was 67, so I was already
Mhm,
an age where a lot of my friends had retired
mhm,
from
mhm,
working, and my wife, "When are you gonna retire?" It's like, "Well, I probably not." And,
mhm, mhm.
um, so I started pondering this whole thing about what would it take for this place to continue when I'm not here, because there will be a day when I'm not here,
Yeah.
for whatever reason that is. I hope it's not soon, but
Mhm,
that will
mhm,
happen. So I started talking with Markus Spohn,
mhm,
who started as a customer in 2006, I believe. He
mhm,
was living in the Bay Area, and he bought his first guitar in 2006, and subsequently probably bought 15 guitars of
mhm,
ours. Once he had got the first one, then he started selling other things he had,
mhm.
um, and so I started talking to him just because he had a different kind of business experience than I had had. So I was And he just was always the a helpful person.
Mhm,
He would
mhm,
come down to go to NAMM shows with us and help us, and then he started working on some software for us because our ordering system had been built by Lori
mhm,
using a DOS
mhm, mhm,
database,
mhm,
which you can't even run anymore. So he was one that kind of brought us into the present age with our order taking and inventory software and stuff.
mhm,
So we started talking. I just started talking about this whole idea of someday I won't be here. And we talked and talked and for months. And I started saying, I think Marcus is, you, you could do this, you know?
mhm,
And he would always laugh, oh, yeah, sure.
mhm, mhm,
And then months later, after we talked it, and I probably said that a zillion times, he goes, "You're serious, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, I'm very serious." So we talked some more about it. We talked about money. We talked about location because he lived in the Bay Area. He has a wife and a daughter.
mhm,
And so he talked it over with his family, and we came to an agreement of what we thought would work. and they came down here just to kind of look at housing and see where would they live, what would it cost, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And they were at our house for dinner that evening while they were down here, and they put an offer on a house, and it got accepted that evening. So this was happening.
We're in. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was I think it was 4.5 years ago now, or almost, I think it'll be 5 years this summer.
This space is normally reserved for brands who make stories like this possible, like the Dario and the Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop. If your company belongs in this conversation, let's talk. We partner with brands who value craft, culture, and the quiet power of a well-placed idea.
So he came down here with the plan that he would be the succession plan.
Yeah.
And that, we were not hoping for me to be gone anytime soon, and that's still the plan, But he's just, when I was telling the crew, we had a big meeting one day, and I gave him the whole story about, someday I won't be here, blah, 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 blah. And I have this person in mind that I think is gonna come here, and I think it'll be a great fit. And I think, and you guys all know him. And after the meeting, one of the guys came up to me and he goes, "When you were saying that, I was saying, I hope it's Markus. I hope it's Markus. I hope it's Markus." And it was Markus, because everybody knew him, because he comes down here. He was here 3 times a year, 4 times a year, and so he came on, and I think I knew technology and computers and personnel administrative tasks were totally in his wheelhouse. What I didn't know was how meticulous and what a fast learner he is. He'd been setting up his own guitars and stuff, and he would change pickups or something like that. But he came in, and it just so happened the first year he was here, we had a couple of guys go out on paternity leave. So he just fully immersed himself in the finish department, staining tops and all that stuff, and then spraying paint and all that stuff. And just he's unflappable. It doesn't. I don't care what the task is. If you say, "Hey, Markus, do you want to try this?" Sure, absolutely. Yeah. I think I can do that. Yeah. And he's just ridiculously fast learner. And like I said, he's doing the initial first pass on the guitars now, and it's just, they're flawless. It's just, I hardly ever turn a screw, because it's just, he's German descent, and he epitomizes all the goodness that there is in German.
Yeah.
And has a heart for people, and that's what has made the biggest difference, I think. He's just, there's a more of a feeling of more than ever feeling of camaraderie, and we're all in this together, and we've continued the whole, at the end of the year, we share whatever profit there is in the business with all the employees, because that's why we make profit, because everybody's doing a really great job.
Yeah.
So we had a few lean years where it wasn't so great, but it's, for quite some time, it's pretty nice. So it's a good thing. It's always fun when we're interviewing new people for the job, and we can talk about benefits and profit sharing and stuff, and you can see their eyes get big, it's like, what? So, all that stuff. So Markus was absolutely the most recent pivotal moment. Because it's both, his and my musical backgrounds are totally different, which is also fun, because I'm an old guy, and I'm used to old school sounds and an old school playing style and stuff, and he grew up a metal kid, so it's fun to see the interaction between him and some of the younger crew members, that are to do, and we're doing things that we're kind of divergent from where we were headed before, a little bit, not like a completely different direction, but a different emphasis, say. And we've expanded too. We've Markus has pushed us a little bit to see if we can do more, and then if we can't, what do we need to change to how can we meet that goal?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And it's created opportunities for people here. Now we have a little bit of a hierarchy where it used to be Tom's in charge and everyone else comes to Tom. And now we definitely have department heads and people that have responsibility to make things happen. So, and he's now getting into design and programming, also CAD and CAM work, which is traditionally I've done all of.
Yeah.
So it's been really fun for me to watch him. He's a sponge, he just picks up everything. And also has created a nicer environment, I would say, here at the shop. We've never, been a few times in our history where, you have one person that's just a grumpy person, and it just drags everybody down. And we just don't have that now. And it's nice to come to work.
That's great.
So there's my moments.
Well, thank you, Tom.
Long moments.
It's been a long and fruitful career.
Yeah.
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 Can't cover that in 2.5 minutes. No.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So, as we sort of wrap that up, is there, you're standing at the podium with an award, you've just sort of talked about thanking everyone for the work and the history, and is there anyone you feel like didn't get mentioned there, any moment there you can just sort of reflect upon before we wrap this up? Or
Well, I would say something that I don't know if it's general knowledge, but the guitar industry, the people that make guitars, is a pretty tight-knit group of people. People from other industries that come into this are shocked that John Suhr and I are good friends and that we talk to each other all the time and we text back and forth, and Nick Huber and Bob Taylor and everybody out there. There's Sheldon Dingwall, and it's just in the guitar business now, unlike when I started 40 plus years ago. If I'm having a problem with material, say my finish, like what is going on? We're having failures in finish. What's going on? I'll get on the phone and call John, or I'll call Bob, or I'll call, somebody else, and we all help each other to solve problems. And so consequently, I think that's one of the reasons you're seeing, and Avi Shabbat. I mean, it's like from the grand scale of Bob Taylor to the guy making 20 guitars a year. Everybody can talk.
Yeah.
At the NAMM show, we had dinner, and Sully Guitars.
Yeah, John.
He came to dinner with us, and he's never been with us before. And it was just so fun to talk with him. And
he's a wonderful person.
Yes.
And larger than life character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was really fun for him to see this.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of, when you're new at something, you're a little reluctant to ask somebody questions because maybe that's their secret or their whatever. But there just really aren't many secrets in making guitars. It's hard work, and you have to be diligent, And so I think that's something that every guitar player is now reaping the benefits of, all of us talking to each other and helping each other make better guitars. So I think, I think you could argue that guitars are better than they've ever been. Yes, some of those old guitars are great guitars, but they weren't all great guitars.
I
had plenty of horrible pre-CVS Fenders before,
Yes.
but they were a production cheap guitar. So I think this is a wonderful time to be making guitars. I do wonder. I was surprised at the NAMM show this year. I mean, there was probably 20 people that I'd never heard of before making guitars and making respectable guitars. These weren't import guitars. These were people in this country making guitar, or in Europe even, making really nice guitars.
Yeah.
And it's like, I wonder what it's like to break into this business now.
Hmm.
You know, when I was doing it, it was so different than it is now. You know, there was no communication other than magazine ads
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. So it was really, you had to run around beating on people to want to have your stuff in their store. You know, why would I want to have your guitar? You only make a few guitars, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have all my Fenders and Gibsons and Rickenbackers.
Mm-hmm.
So Bob Taylor, super instrumental.
Yeah.
He's always shares information, technology.
He says the same thing about you. I had him on the stage in the Boutique Guitar Showcase a few weeks ago at the NAMM show in a panel discussion, and he talks about this moment where you came to see him.
Yeah.
And take a tour of his shop, and you guys were talking about how you do next. He says, well, how do you do next? He said, well, I have this computer, this machine. He's like, tour's over. We're going to your place.
Yeah.
And he talks about how you changed the future of Taylor guitars. You know, and I think that speaks to what you're talking about, that sort of interchange between.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's not like
it's
not like one person's getting all the benefit out of all this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's like everybody's just really shares, and it's
Yeah.
And there's a few that aren't as great at sharing, but that's okay.
Yeah.
You know.
It's what I love about this part of the industry as well.
Yeah.
I've made my career in this spot because it has become my family.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned Nick, and Nick and I came up together. You know, we were both young in the business together, and we're still very, very close. You know, as a matter of fact, when just before lunch, I got an email from him saying he's got his 30th anniversary coming up, and please come over to Frankfurt and celebrate with them. You know, in Rodgau. And so it really is a wonderful place, and there's just, well, I've said for years, there's just no room for assholes. We're all doing this because we love it.
Yeah.
You know, and so like, if you're not going to love this with us, just go do something else.
Yeah, people that don't participate intentionally just don't. You know, it's not like you push to try to get them involved. It's like, if you want do your thing, go ahead.
Yeah.
You know? But you're missing out. You know.
Yes. Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Tom, thank you for your contribution to the guitar. I agree that there are better guitars made today than we've ever made guitars before, and you have an important part to play in that role.
Thanks.
So you have the world of guitar is better because of Tom Anderson and your life to this.
My wife will say this is a hobby gone wild, which is kind of what it is. And
you liked it because it was a wild hobby.
Yeah, and I'm still doing this because I'm trying to make the guitars I wished I'd had when I was 20 years old. You know, that thing I talked about with Dave Schecter, pointing out the things that should be better. Well, there's lots of room for improvement on almost anything in the world, and it's just fun to keep working at that.
Yeah. So, another day. Aim up.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for aiming up, Tom.
All right.
And thank you for being on Life with Strings Attached.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Ciao for now.
All right.
You've been listening to Life with Strings Attached. If today's conversation meant something to you, consider passing it on. These stories find their place through the people who share them. A new episode comes out every Friday, right here, wherever you're listening. I'm Jamie Gale, and thanks for listening to Life with Strings Attached.